All right, let's jump right into this explainer and piece together something truly massive, the rise of the very first empire of the Indian subcontinent. We are looking at a really remarkable period stretching from roughly 321 to 184 BCE, which is a time that completely redefined the political and cultural landscape of ancient India.
So we're going to play historian today, because honestly, figuring out exactly who the Mauryas were requires sifting through this giant ancient puzzle of contradictory texts and scattered stones. It's definitely not a straightforward story. It's more like a fascinating detective case where our primary witnesses, well, they often completely disagree with one another.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll cover 1. The First Indian Empire. 2. Clues from the past. 3. The origins mystery. 4. Forging the empire. And finally, 5. Ashoka the Great. Section 1. The First Indian Empire. The Rise of Magadha. Back in 321 BC, the growth of the Magadha region culminated in an absolute powerhouse of a state. This emerging power centralized its control at the capital city of Pataliputra, establishing an empire the likes of which the subcontinent had literally never seen. This was the dawn of the Mauryan Empire.
But there's a wild contradiction at the very heart of the empire's identity. The actual name Maurya, it doesn't even show up in the contemporary Greek accounts, like the famous Indica by Megasthenes. And even more shockingly, it is completely missing from the vast stone inscriptions left behind by the empire's own greatest king, Ashoka.
In fact, we don't officially see the Maurya label firmly attached to these kings in stone until much later. It takes an inscription from 150 AD by Rudra Daman, known as the Junagadh rock inscription, to finally prefix Maurya to the names of Chandragupta and Ashoka. And as a quick aside, this same rock also records the construction of a major water reservoir called the Sudarshana Lake.
Moving to Section 2, Clues from the Past. How we know what we know. Let's take a look at the actual ancient sources that somehow survived the centuries to build our understanding today.
We have a few varying literary accounts to work with. On one hand, there's the Arthashastra, which is Kautilya's famous manual on polity and governance. Then we have the Indica, written by the Greek ambassador Megasthenes, which describes the Mauryan administration, a 7-caste system, and intriguingly notes that there was no slavery in India. And finally, there's Vishakadatta's Mudrakasha, a much later dramatic account from the Gupta period that details exactly how Chandragupta defeated the old ruling Nanda Dynasty.
But wait, here's where the puzzle gets even more complicated. It is incredibly fascinating that the Prime Minister's own legendary book on statecraft, the Arthashastra, completely leaves out his boss's name. Seriously, Kautilya does not make a single reference to the Mauryas, the empire itself, Chandragupta, or even the capital of Pataliputra. It's absolutely one of history's great mysteries. So, because the texts can be so contradictory, the physical evidence provides our most solid grounding. The rock and pillar edicts are huge here. They mark the true beginning of Indian epigraphy. For the first time, we finally hear the direct, first-person ideas and voice of the king, Ashoka himself. Add to that the archaeological remains scattered across sites like Bulindibag and Kumrahar associated with Pataliputra, plus Taxila, Mathura, and Beta, and the empire finally takes physical shape. Which brings us to Section 3, the origins mystery. Where did the Mauryas come from? We know they existed, for sure, but the origins of the founder, Chandragupta, are heavily debated, and it depends entirely on which ancient text you happen to be reading.
We've got to look at these clashing views impartially. On one side, Buddhist texts like the Digha Nikaya and Mahavamsa elevate their status, saying they belong to a Kshatriya clan called the Mauryas. But in stark contrast, Brahmanical traditions and dramatic texts like the Mujarakshasa claim a much lower social origin. A commentator on the Vishnu Purana even claims Chandragupta was the son of the last Nanda king and a Shudra woman, the daughter of a hunter named Mora. The suggestion there is that as the son of Mora, he became known as Maurya.
Just to add another totally fascinating layer to the mystery, the Jain tradition throws us a total curveball. Hemachandra's text describes Chandragupta as the grandson of a chief from a village of Mayuraposhikas, which literally translates to peacock tamers. So, was he a noble Kshatriya, the son of a hunter's daughter, or descended from a village of peacock tamers? The debate definitely rages on.
All right, Section 4, Forging the Empire, 3 epic rulers. Let's leave the origin debates behind for a minute and map out exactly how this family forged their dynasty over roughly 137 years, spanning from the late 4th century BCE to the first quarter of the 2nd century BCE. We are going to focus on the three absolute heavyweights of this continuous, powerful succession: the founder, Chandragupta Maurya, his son, Bindusara, and finally, his grandson, Ashoka.
Let's kick things off with Chandragupta, who ruled from 321 to 298 BC. Known to the Greeks as Sandrokotas, he was a true conqueror who, alongside his mentor Kautilya, overthrew the old Nanda Dynasty. His biggest international achievement? Definitively ending Greek dominance in northwestern India by defeating Seleucus Nicator around 303 BC. This win resulted in a peace treaty, a royal marriage to Seleucus' daughter Helena, and the arrival of Megasthenes as ambassador.
But you know what's truly mind-blowing? How his reign ended. In a stunning turn of events recorded in a Jain text, this great conqueror simply abdicated his throne, handed it over to his son, and under the influence of the Jain monk Bhadrabahu, traveled south to Shravana-Belagola in modern Karnataka. There he performed Salekana, a religious practice of fasting to death. That brings us to his son, Bindusara, who ruled from 297 to 268 BC. Bindusara expanded on his father's fierce legacy, earning the rather intense title Amitragatha, meaning the killer of foes. Religiously, he charted his own path as a follower of the Ajivaka sect, and globally, he maintained robust diplomatic relations, receiving Greek diplomats from both Syria and Egypt right there at his court. And right in the middle of all this high-level, ancient geopolitics, we get this incredibly relatable, humanizing detail. Bindusara actually sent correspondence to the Syrian ruler Antiochus I to basically order an ancient care package. He specifically requested wine, dried figs, and a Greek philosopher or sophist to be sent over to his court.
But it wasn't all just wine and figs. The transition to the next ruler got really dark. Texts tell us the citizens of Taxila revolted against an oppressive Mauryan bureaucracy, which was being overseen by Bindusara's elder son, Susama. Ashoka, who was the governor of Ujjain at the time, was sent in and successfully suppressed it. And according to the Sinhalese Buddhist text, the Mahavamsa, when Bindusara died, Ashoka ultimately seized power through a brutal war of succession, a literal fratricide around 268 BC.
Section 5, Ashoka the Great, Conquest and Transformation. That incredibly violent, blood-soaked beginning leads us right into the reign of Ashoka from 268 to 232 BC. He is arguably the most complex and transformative figure in this entire explainer.
Before we talk about his conquests, ancient texts give us a peek into his personal life. His mother was Queen Subhadrangi, and he had several queens himself. But famously, he and Devi, a merchant's daughter, had children, Mahinda and Sangamita, who would eventually join the Buddhist Sangha and become absolutely instrumental in spreading Buddhism far beyond India, most notably to Sri Lanka.
But the defining moment, not just of Ashoka's life, but arguably the entire Mauryan era, was the Kalinga War in 261 BC, fought during his 8th regnal year at Dalagiri. The absolute devastation and horrific death toll of this conquest profoundly changed him. It was an event so catastrophic that Ashoka etched his deep remorse directly into stone in Major Rock Edict 13, for all of history to read. It marked his famous pivot towards spreading Buddhist principles instead of war.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've pieced together this massive, complex, and highly transformative empire from just a handful of clues. A missing name in a book, a carved rock here, an ancient debate about peacock tamers there. Which really makes you wonder, if the mighty Mauryas were nearly lost to time, relying on conflicting texts and scattered stones just to be remembered, how much of human history is still just waiting beneath the dirt to be uncovered?